the percussion instrument, the mardala, and whereas the upper body is literally tied to the melodic modes or the raga. All of that is a lot of tension in the body that I feel is potent in channeling towards a social justice cause. This piece, Pukar, Calling for Justice, the movements have come out through this idea of tension and struggle that people are facing as they are encountering this absolutely new technique. My students have been my co-creators. Because we were in a moment of pandemic and a social upheaval, I wanted the students to really address their moments. I would take those movements and make it Odissi-esque and give it a tone, give it a color that would connect the entire movement back to my research and my ideas around this moment of loss of youth potency to the pandemic of gun violence. Hide, run, fight. Hide, run, fight. That incident taught me a lot. It has continued to be in my consciousness and in my artistic psyche. The importance of continuing no matter what, and the importance of empathy. I think this idea of opposition and difference and constantly being in dialogue and not necessarily erasing dialogue, right? Erasing difference. I think that is key to social justice, yes. Pukar, Calling for Justice, paves the way of thinking through multiplicity, of thinking through difference, of thinking through how various aesthetics can be within the concert scenario and how various aesthetics can influence the viewership as well as the performers. Okay, thank you. Again, I would want to make this very interactive. Whatever thoughts you have on this particular work, please feel free to put it on the chat such that I can, gauge what you are taking away from this talk. So the next thing that I want to bring forth is the issue of caste. So I talked about one social issue situated geopolitically, sort of in the United States, and the second is the issue of caste. And caste is endemic to all things that happen in the Indian continent, subcontinent. Unfortunately, that is the reality we live in. And the Indian classical dance scenario, the Indian classical dance is unfortunately is sort of a casteist appropriation of hereditary dancers, lineage dancers who have practiced dances for many, many years. And towards that, I want to draw your attention to this particular article by Shri Veena Mani. This particular article called Caste Barriers in India Prove Hurdle for Artists from Minority Communities. I'm sharing it in the chat. I'm drawing your attention to this particular article, especially because how this article lays down for us, and I'm going to share my screen to show this, how this article lays down for us very, very succinctly the history of Indian classical dance and how caste continues to marginalize minority communities. And here in the picture, you have Nritya Pillai. Nritya Pillai belongs to a Devadasi community, the Isai Vellar community, and she claims that she is the only woman, only female artist to have taken up this dance because it was appropriated at the dawn of the construction of Indian classical dance. And we are talking about the early 20th century. That's when this Indian classical dance project took place. Rukmini Devi Arundel, a very important name in the history of Indian classical dance. She was the architect of Bharatnatyam, and then Bharatnatyam became a template for all the other Indian classical dances that we know, including Odissi. So I'm not claiming that these dances do not have very long histories and lineage. However, I do want to point out how caste even continues to be a strong marginalizing factor. And just recently, you see there was an attempt to suicide of a Dalit dancer from Kerala, RLV Ramakrishnan, who practices Mohiniyattam and who was sort of marginalized because he belonged to a Dalit community, because it was casteist marginalization. So I bring these difficult issues of gun violence and caste to us, especially to draw attention to how dance is not bereaved of society, how dance is in, as well as how dance is of the society, how dance is integrally connected to the society. I would probably now formally start my presentation. I have a PowerPoint, and that specifically focuses on my book project of Dance, Technology, Social Justice. It is currently in review with McFarland Publishers, located in North Carolina. And in this book project, I'm arguing that dance is or can be a technology of social justice. So first, I show how dance and technology are sort of connected, or how connections can be made between dance and technology. And then I show in the work of particular choreographer how that is being a technology of social justice. So I draw your attention first to my research in dance technology. And this is a particular article, Dancing Across Media, Composing the Odissi Body. And I co-wrote this article with Professor Erin Kathleen Ball, who is located in the University of Georgia in Atlanta. And here you see how the moving body, this is my dancing body, has been mediated, technologically mediated into data. And that data is then sort of further superimposed on a digital 3D model, a 3D avatar. And here you see how my dancing body and how the digital dancing bodies are coexisting in the same plane. And here I have my dancer story, and here Erin Ball has her designer story. So she took my research in dance technology and designed this entire web space. And I encourage you all to see it in your own leisure, and I'm sharing it in your chat. It's a fun read. So again, if you have any questions, please put it in the chat. I formally start my presentation on my book project, basically, Dance, Technology, Social Justice. And a particular concept that I'm grappling with in this book is sensate technicities. how movement creates community, how movement creates connection, how movement creates a sort of electrical impulse, right? Electricity connects across distances. So how movement can be that electrical impulse. And my work is located within digital humanities. I'm very curious about this field, and especially how humanistic inquiry, how human values, how humanity can really affect the digital realm that we are encountering on a day-to-day level, especially during and after the pandemic. And then I will further, in the second part of my presentation, I will say a few words on this idea of social justice and dance. And here I'm going to talk about questioning capitalism, questioning the modernity we live in. So digital humanities, if you go to Google, well, we do Google all things. It says it's an academic field concerned with the application of computational tools and methods to traditional humanities disciplines, such as literature, history, philosophy. Well, I want to flip that question. I want to ask what happens when humanistic concerns are placed at the center of technology, right? So instead of technology being applied to humanistic inquiries, I want to flip it and think the other way around. And I just shared with you this particular way of really coexisting material culture. Here you see Raja Rani temple located in Bhubaneswar, Odisha, right? So here you have Raja Rani temple, and I'm sort of in one of those crevices, but I'm surrounded with Alasakanyas. I'm surrounded with sculptural friezes of Nupura Padika. Here you see Nupura Padika. Here you see so many different sort of alasa, so many different ways of being in sculpture. So here, but apart from sculpture, which is the material culture around, we also see digital artifacts, right? You see the digital artifact of costume, digital artifact of stone work, and digital artifact of the simple skeletal dancing body. Odissi Technique. So just a little bit grounding in the Odissi Technique. The technique is deeply codified and immense in terms of its scope and reach. So even in this little snapshot, a lot is communicated. First of all, my left hand is in Tamrachura and right hand is in Suchi. The left hand sort of gestures towards the female and the right hand gestures as the male. And this itself is a combination of a non-binary gender representation. This is an excerpt from Ardhanariswara. Ardhanariswara means half man, half woman. And this was choreographed by Guru Padma Vibhushan Kelucharan Mahapatra, who has been an important architect of Odissi technique, especially Guru Kelucharan Mahapatra dance technique. This photograph was taken in a festival in Bangalore in 2016. So much is captured in just a moment. Just a moment, my face is speaking, my hands are speaking, my feet are sort of in the air, showing some sort of dynamism in the body. So that's Odissi technique to you, and it is highly codified, and also one might say Sanskritized, because it's sort of codifications are connected both to the Natya Shastra and also to the local regional developments in Orissa, as codified in Maheshwar Mahapatra's Abhinay Chandrika. And then even later, as early as in the around the 50s and 60s, we have Guru Kumkum Mahanti sort of codify Odissi technique for most of us, actually, in two very important volumes called the Odissi Dance Pathfinder. And those volumes are very prolific, and they are used as grounds and foundations of the technique. So I go back to my dissertation. My book project starts with my dissertation called Mahari Out, Deconstructing Odissi. And I use the word out in a strategic manner. I use it to connect my work with queer theory. So queer theory is this idea of coming out, right? Idea of really coming out, and this notion of acknowledging a non-binary gender, a non sort of dominant sexual orientation of either masculinity or femininity. So that way, I force this idea of the temple dancer or the Mahari, and I force the idea of how she, the Mahari, the temple dancer, who has been marginalized by the likes of me, right? Typical upper class or middle to upper class, upper caste dominant dancers. Typically, they have ousted and marginalized the historical temple dancer and made profit, right? And taken advantage. So I was interested in really charting the life story of Shoshimoni Devi. Shoshimoni Devi was the last performing Mahari who died in 2015. And so Shoshimoni Devi's sort of death inspired my dissertation. So this is Shoshimoni Devi, Mahari Shoshimoni Devi with live percussionist to demonstrate her performance from the documentary Given to Dance. Given to Dance is a documentary which was created by scholar Frederick Appel Marglin, and she was herself a non-native Odissi artist. And here you have Mahari Shoshimoni Devi performing, presenting her beauty, her artistry. So my dissertation also continued on thinking about dance technology, how one can recreate these lost images of the Mahari in 3D animation. And as inspiration, I took the beautiful Natya Mandapa, the dancing hall of Konark Temple, Konark Sun Temple. And I included a sort of an evocative sculptural dancing figure amidst the Natya Mandapa. So that was my dissertation. So I continued my research in thinking about deconstructing Odissi, thinking about how Odissi can be made more democratic, how Odissi can speak to its own marginalizations, its own historical marginalizations. And I continue to work on the Mahari imagery. And in a humorous take, I say that, you know, she is a bad dancer. Shoshimoni Devi is apparently a bad dancer, and that's why you rejected her in history. So this was my tribute to her. And here I have Dr. Hans Utter, an ethnomusicologist, as well as a brilliant sitar player who's based in Columbus, Ohio. I continue my choreographic analysis, or rather choreographic experimentations. And here I am with Professor Rachel Barker. Professor Rachel Barker is a contemporary dance artist. She's trained in ballet, modern, contemporary dance artist, born and raised in the United States. And here, this is a performance in New York in 2017. And in this performance, we really break apart Ardhanariswara, which is this idea of feminine and masculine energies staying in the same soul, staying in the same entity. And I continued my investigations with architecture, with Odissi Anima. Odissi Anima was a collaboration with Professor Mark Manack in the School of Architecture at the University of North Carolina and in Charlotte. And I presented Odissi Anima, which was a way of investigating Mahari ritual. So from the Mahari ritual, we were inspired to create a damru, an electronic drum in the shape of a damru. and how that drum would change colors based on colors and movement based on my movement. So it was a very interactive way of moving. And we created this work in 2018. We performed it in 2018, and I recently performed it in 2022 after 4 years in a local arts festival called Boom. So just to think about the theoretical implications from Mahari out, right, from my dissertation to Odissi Anima. So here, architecture as set design to architecture as choreographic score. So something to really think about, you know, here you see a template of the drumru, the electronic drum that I'm playing around with. And in my dissertation, I was thinking about the Konark Sun Temple, the Natya Mandapa, and I was thinking about how that architecture is supporting the movement. But in Odissi Anima, architecture became a collaborator. It did not just demarcated the space in which I was dancing, it was also becoming the dance. So architecture itself was becoming the dance. So the foundational premise is this idea of distributed body, you know, the way of the distribution of the body in your surroundings, in your sociocultural worlds. So for me, it was historical movement practice through Mahari, Shoshimoni Devi, sculpture through the Alasa Kanyas, and architecture, as I mentioned, how the beautiful architectures of Konark Sun Temple, Jagannath Sun Temple inform the Odissi body. And even think about the tahiya, or the head, the rounded head piece that we wear, that it's and the chura at the center, that itself is a reminiscence of Jagannath Puri. So thinking a little bit of the theoretical framework, I'm going to get into a little dry material in terms of sort of grounding my work in theory. So Techne, technology. Techne simply means, it's a Greek term, and techne means this idea of revealing. It is the root word of technology. So it in Greek language, it sort of means bringing forth or revealing, right? And philosophers such as Heidegger, Susan Kozel, Federica Frabetti, they have really used this idea of techne in thinking about dance technique and in thinking about how dance technique coexists with technology. And here I want to draw attention here to Federica Frabetti's provocation, where she is questioning the subordination of techne to episteme. So techne is this idea of embodied movement, or idea of bringing forth in a skilled manner. And episteme, which is the root word for epistemology or knowledge. How is knowledge created? So techne is politically subordinate to episteme, right? And that already creates the hierarchy of mind body. So the mind becomes episteme, which is the idea of how knowledge is neck up, right? How all the knowledge is in the head, and then the body is not important. And similarly, one can say that dance is looked at as entertainment, dance is looked at as sexual, dance is looked at as not intelligent enough. However, we dancers know how difficult it is, because you are listening to music, you're coordinating your eyes, neck, hands, feet, and then you are also trying to connect perhaps to a higher purpose or communicate, right? So dance indeed is a combination of techne and episteme. So really thinking about techne and episteme on the same platform rather than one being episteme being above techne. So for me, I created a working definition of technology, an intimate revealing that brings forth the radical relationalities and the embodied epistemological processes embedded within the choreographic process. So within the choreographic process, you have knowledge producing possibilities, and those are the epistemological processes that I am pointing towards. So technology is at the cusp of dance technique in studio investigations, 3D animation, maker spaces, visualization laboratories, 3D printing workshops, right? All of those 3D printing workshops were used to create the drum. 3D animation laboratories were used to create the Mahari out, right? All of these are part of this process of thinking about choreography as knowledge or dance as knowledge. So these are some of my motivating questions. What is dance? Is it the art of human movement, technology of human motion, a combination of art and technology? What does technology do in the real world? So on and so forth. So I'm continuing to really think about technology, but also thinking about how dance can be a technology of social justice. And towards that, I continue my investigation of looking at other choreographers, other projects. And, I'm sharing my methodology. My methodology is multiple, and theoretical frameworks are also multiple. So I have critical cultural theory, queer theory, transnational feminism, and digital humanity. So this is an interdisciplinary work, and the methodology also is quite interdisciplinary, as you see here. So as I mentioned, I look at other choreographers, I look at other projects. So I look at a project called Dance Draw. And as you see here, you have artists trained in Euro-American concert practices, ballet, modern, contemporary, and how their movement is creating projections in real time. So you see an interplay of technology and movement. So you see choreographic visualization and creative augmentation. However, I find this work as ahistorical, acultural, and really looking at one aspect of technology, which is this progress-based narrative, that technology is just progress-oriented. But technology also has its pitfalls, as we all know, with the global climate problem. So beyond the visual domain, beyond the evaluative domain, how can we think about technologies of social justice? And towards that, I go to contemporary Indian dance choreographer and dance scholar, Dr. Anunna Chatterjee. And here you see a particular choreography called Shamoli, Sprouting Words. And this is by Anunna Dance Theatre, which is of which Dr. Anunna Chatterjee is the choreographic head, is the artistic director. So this choreography also uses technology. At the back, you see the grass, the green grass, and how that is use of technological projections. But here you are literally also feeling the coming together of women of color, the coming together of transnational feminist praxis, the coming together of various races. Just in this picture, a snapshot, you see Hawaiian, Filipino, African American, South Asian, white, Middle Eastern. You see so many bodies coexisting in the same space. So this to me is indeed an important example of dance as social justice. So I would rest my case here by noting how dance is indeed a possibility of a worldview, a possibility of rethinking dance's own historical marginalizations and constantly questioning it. But at the same time, showing the world, showing the larger non-dancing world, how dance can be a social good. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Shahili. Thank you so much for inviting me, and I would love to open it up for any questions if anybody has any questions. Please feel free to unmute yourself.
Yes. Hello, Kahini ma'am, are you?
I cannot hear you.
I think she's not. Can you hear me, ma'am?
Yes, I can hear you, Madhurima.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much, ma'am, for your such enriching lecture. And we got to know many such innovative aspects of dance, how it is related to different aspects of society with social justice regarding the issues of gun. So much, ma'am, for this enriching session. So I would now request the participants to kindly write your questions in the chat box, or if you want, you can unmute yourself and ask our respected speaker the question as well. Students, participants, please write your questions in the chat box. If you want to ask any question to ma'am, or you can unmute yourself and ask as well.
I'm very curious to know what everyone here, we have quite a few participants here. We are about 20 of us. I would be very curious to hear your thoughts. Thank you for sharing, Shohini Ghosh, dance's improved condition of our heart. That is why we are all here, aren't we? We are here to really think about how dance can improve our lives. Okay, so Lalria Kuli Mar, am I saying your name correctly? I'm not saying your name correctly. Would you unmute yourself and please introduce yourself?
Alriatpui, are you there? She is one of our PG students of Sociology Department.
Okay, sorry, you have your...
Ma'am, can I read out her question?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, she says that since she's from Northeast, she has very limited knowledge about classical dance. So her question is like, how this classical dance has a relation with Hinduism, Hindu religion.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Lalria Kui. Classical dance comes out of Hindu religion. It cannot be sort of separated. The two are sort of intrinsically connected to each other, because the project of classical dance traces back to Natya Shastra, and Natya Shastra is considered as the fifth Veda, quote unquote fifth Veda. So Indian classical dance, the project itself is a very Hindu project. However, having said that, there are practitioners who are non-Indians. There are Indian practitioners who do not necessarily have an active religious affiliation. So today, one can say it's practiced as a concert practice, as an art practice. However, its roots continue to lie in Hinduism, and there are numerous practitioners out there who practice it as insiders, who practice it as cultural insiders, religious insiders? So thank you for that question. Hope I answered it.
Ms. Shaili, thank you so much for this interesting topic. I don't know much about the dance postures, but today I have gained some of the knowledge about this, how we can relate the social justice and dance and other issues. So, ma'am, I have just one question about the methodology. You have said you have taken 4 methodology at the same time. So whether it's obviously it's a mixed method. Uh, how do you triangulate all these methods in a same dissertation? Just for a query, if you just elaborate in that issue.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question, Dr. Shahili. So my dissertation was not, this is my book project, right? So which is dissertation and. So for my dissertation, I did not have so many methodologies. I simply had choreographic analysis. I was looking at other choreography, and I was looking at this sort of intermedia experimentation, which is dance technology. And I placed all of it in the theoretical framework of deconstruction. So my dissertation is called Mahari Out Deconstructing Odissi. So this is one example of theory as method, critical theory as method. So I'm triangulating my experience, my experiments with theory, the deconstruction theory. And here I was drawing both from Abhinava Gupta, from our lineage, Indian lineage, and Jacques Derrida, who sort of coined this term of post-structuralist deconstruction. So that was a part of my dissertation. But the book project is sort of growing out of that dissertation, where different chapters are dealing with different things. So one chapter where I'm working on dance technology, I'm still working with these ideas of deconstruction and theory as method. And then the chapter on Ananya Dance Theatre, that is a strict choreographic analysis, where I am literally looking at choreography, looking at Ananya dance, like literary analysis. One have literary analysis. So similarly, or archival analysis of data, of historical data, historical archives. Similarly, you have choreography analysis, where movement is your data, movement is the source. And definitely autoethnography, because I have stayed in Minnesota. I continue to be active with the Ananya Dance Theatre. I call myself an ADT groupie. You know how rock bands have groupies where they're just fans. So I really appreciate how Ananya Dance Theatre brings forth dance as a technology of social justice. So in order to understand that fully, I like to stay there. So I do ethnography, which is participant observation. I stay there. I spend months with them, with the artists, with the costume maker, with the scenograpist, with the musicians, other collaborators, directors. I spend hours with them understanding their choreographic process. So I would say that my methodology is mixed methods, especially in my book. But it really draws this idea of theory, critical theory as method. I hope that answered your question, Dr. Shahili.
Thank you so much.
Ma'am, there is. Okay. Ma'am, there is another question from Deepkona there. She's also our PG student from Sociology Department. She has actually asked you regarding sharing about the status of classical dancers in India in comparison with other countries. Like, are they looked upon, down upon, or this profession is very much encouraged? And her second question is there any gender discrimination in the field of dance abroad?
Okay, these are great questions, Devkanya De. So I'll take your first question. So the status of classical dance. So I will say that the status of classical dance in India is high. It's really high. It's literally at the top of the pyramid, right? It's at the top of the pyramid. However, that status is lost when you are a world dance form competing with Cambodian dance, Nigerian dance, um, Irish step dance, Hawaiian hula, all of that is sort of, you are on the same plane. So whether you do Odissi or Bhangra or hula or Apsara from Cambodia, you are on the same plane, right? So there's no understanding that you have this high status as an Indian classical dancer in India. So definitely you lose that status. And there's also a little bit of racism in higher education in the United States, where there is still that unfortunate understanding that all technique comes from ballet. You know, all dance technique comes from the Euro-American aesthetic, which starts in European aristocracy, which is ballet, right? So there is that weird assumption still. Unfortunately, it's improving. It's really improving, but there is still that assumption that, oh, if you can do ballet, you know the ballet technique, you can do Odissi. No, right? You cannot. If you do ballet, you cannot do Bhangra. You have to learn it. So that is something to be noted. And the gender discrimination in the field of dance abroad, like dance as in India here as well, it's you do have a lot of females, right? More women than men. However, I will say that dance as a field in the United States is very progressive. It is very progressive in the ways that it really fights for gender equality. It really fights for sort of progressive issues, and it fights for LGBTQ rights. And you do have non-normative genders, non-normative sexual orientations, participating in the dance department. So for example, in my own department, we do have male identified students, female identified students, students who take the pronoun they them, where they are sort of thinking not as a male or a female, not in singular way, but in plural terms. And then we do have artists who also go through the process of gender reassignment. So as I mentioned, it's a much progressive field, although there are still ways you can upset typical gender normative behavior. So typically gender normative behavior in ballet would be a man carrying a woman. That would be a gender normative behavior. Although I will say Odissi or Indian dances don't necessarily have gender segregated movement, right? So gender segregated movement is not a part of the vocabulary per se. But it's a very complex question, and I hope I have answered it as best as I can. Thank you. Over to you, Madhurima.
Thank you, ma'am. There is another question from Lal Riyatpui. Her question is like, did any dancer use some challenges in the field of racism or caste disparity?
Yes, absolutely, Lal Riyatpui. Absolutely. The answer is yes. From my own experience also, I could say it's racism is still a reality sometimes, implicitly, explicitly. And yes, as I mentioned before, this idea of, even in my department, right? In my department, I teach only one course of Odissi, right? Only one course of Odissi, and you hardly learn anything in one semester. I would rather like to teach 3 years of Odissi, right? That way students get some understanding, students get some grounding in the form. But Odissi is marginalized in my department, right? So again, I'm in a American context, and also students who come, they are not trained in South Asian forms, right? So there is that aspect also. So it's a challenge. And caste disparity, it's a reality. Lalviat Pui, I want to share this particular project called Equality Labs, and I'm sharing this here in our chat. I think this is an extremely good resource. Equality Labs is an archive. It's a project created by Thenmozi Soundarajan. She's an American-based hip-hop artist and an active, avid Dalit rights activist. And she shows how caste is a reality. Caste is a reality in the United States. I'm going to share my screen for just a second and share this data, the statistics with all of us. So here you have a survey of caste in the United States, and you can read the full report here. It's in the Equality Labs. And here, if you see key findings, 25% of Dalits who responded said they faced verbal or physical assault based on their caste. 1 in 3 Dalit students report being discriminated against their education, so on and so forth. So you still see deep-rooted marginalization based on caste, right? So thank you for that question. Yeah, you should go to this website because this will really give you a lot of insight. Thanks, Madhurima. If it's okay, we can wrap up.
Yes. Okay, so I don't think so any more questions are there. If anyone has any question, kindly unmute yourself and you can ask our guest speaker. I think Lal.
Right, Lalviat has a follow-up. Madhurima, she's asked, what are the steps taken to eliminate? So I think the primary steps that have been taken is Equality Labs is one of those projects by Dalit rights activists. And then the Dance Studies Association. Dance Studies Association is an association, a scholarly association in the United States. And what it did recently, it came out with a sort of an entire issue on caste. And in that, scholars like Nritya Pillai, Anurima Banerjee, Rayona Mitra, they discussed at length how Indian dance, how South Asian forms have casteist marginalizations even today, how it's a problem. So yes, but it's an ongoing issue and a lot more work needs to be done. So Dev Khanna is saying dance is a female-dominated field. So some says that the male are benefited through this, like they can easily get attention, rewards, etc. And some others say that they are marginalized due to this. So what is your opinion on this? That's a hard one, Dev Khanna. Definitely, you can say, like, if you are fewer in number, right? Like there are very few male dancers. Then definitely, there is that little advantage. I have to agree to that. So that is my opinion as well. However, masculinity comes with its own sense of anti-dance rhetoric, right? So dance itself becomes this extremely feminized space, and a masculine body performing it is automatically questioned on so many levels. So, I mean, dance is definitely a hard choice, both for men and women. But I would say the social construction, right? We are in sociology, in the Department of Sociology here. So the social construction of I think the social construction of masculinity and the social construction of femininity dispose men and women, male identified and female identified artists differently. You know, how you are negotiating the dance space, it's different. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This was extremely engaging. Thank you, Dr. Shahili. Thank you, Professor Madhurima. Thank you, all the students. Devkanna, Lalrihatpui. Thank you for your questions. This has been extremely lovely, and I'm so glad I started my my dance day with Adamus University. So thank you so much.
Okay, so with this, we come to the end of this session. We wrap up for today. I would like to acknowledge my sincere gratitude goes out to our guest speaker for today, Dr. Kaustavi Sharkar, for taking out her valuable time in addressing all of us on such a pertinent issue on how dance is relevant in society through the different social issues, social problems that she discussed today. That has been very, very enriching. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your enriching session. I would also like to acknowledge our Honorable Chancellor, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor, our respected Dean Sir, Professor Dr. Santosh Kumar, our former Dean Sir, Professor Trideep Chakraborty, our Emeritus Professor, Senior Professor from our department, Professor Ruby Shai, the head of the department, cluster head of the Department of Sociology or Social Sciences, Dr. Shahili Guhon Yogi Ghotok, all my departmental colleagues, followed by all the participants, my dear students from UG and PG. Thank you so much for making this webinar a success. Thank you so much, ma'am. We are eager to listen to you more later on.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, ma'am, and take care.
Take care.